Hello and welcome to a special edition of On Point. I am your host, Tiaira Nowlin. Today we are talking with 3 CSUN graduates about the current state of the broadcast news industry. All of our guests are currently working in the fields of either television or radio news. Here with me today are Melissa McCarty, a reporter at KCBS and KCAL 9 here in Los Angeles, Aron Bender, KFI AM 640 Los Angeles anchor and reporter, and Adam Racusin, KCOY KKFX Central Coast News anchor and reporter. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
So we have a number of CSUN journalism students in the audience right now, and one of the topics of particular interest to the students is the job market and what we do upon graduating and after. So Cynthia Garcia has our first set of questions.
Okay. Once cover letters, reels, and resumes have been sent out to employers, typically a student just has to wait on callbacks or responses. Melissa, is that all the effort you put in after graduation? I mean, you just waited?
I was always very much proactive in that process. You're right about the cover letters. You're right about the demo reels being sent out. You can also follow up with emails if you even want to go the extra mile and do, a thank you card. But I was constantly sending out material, and throughout the time that I was sending out and waiting, I was improving and updating my reel. Even though I was, beyond college, I would continue to do stuff on my own. You can hire a photographer, you can get a bunch of friends with a camera together, you can do things around town to constantly update your reel in the process of waiting. So, I would not just send, I was pretty much at the post office every single day. And when I wasn't doing that, I was updating my material.
Yeah, and follow-up calls. I mean, that's key, because they, in addition to your reel, they're going to get 10, 15, 20, 30 other reels, especially if they've posted a job. If you're just doing cold calls with your demo reels, that might be a little bit better in that you're getting to places or getting to stations that might not necessarily have a job right now, but since you just kind of cold called them with your demo reel, they might remember you when there is a job posting. But if there is a job posting and your reel is just one of many, especially in this job market when there are a lot of people out of work.
I like what Melissa was saying on that. I did the exact same thing. I was incredibly proactive at the post office every week, every other day, sending out demo tape after demo tape. I actually even flew myself to Montana, which was my first job in Billings, Montana. I flew up there and introduced myself to the news director and said, hey, I'm here. I wanted to be in town and just stop and introduce myself. There were no real jobs at the time. 2 months later, I ended up getting a phone call, and that was my first job. So it's a lot about that, being proactive and constantly updating and never giving up on it and just keep surging forward.
In the early part of my spring semester, right before graduation, I started letting stations in California know, because I wanted to start in California. And I knew I had to start in small stations if I wanted to get back to Los Angeles. And I set up interviews for spring break. I did a road trip in Fresno, Chico, one other station somewhere, Santa Rosa. And by the time my spring break was done, I had a job waiting for me by the time I graduated.
So do you recommend students to apply to smaller stations instead of local ones and bigger, you know what I mean?
It's not just recommended, I think it's probably one of the only options, is to, most major market TV stations require, just before, to even get in the door, 3 to 5 years of small to moderate or small to medium market experience.
I mean, you can try smaller markets in the area, such as Chico, Palm Springs, Santa Barbara, but definitely, as you mentioned, you have to, in a sense, pay your dues and go to these faraway places. And I also did the same thing. I did a road trip, and news directors, assistant news directors are very open when you call them to say, hey, look, this is where I'm from. I'm in the area. They get the initiative, and they understand they're always looking for new people. Even if they don't have a position at that moment, they will. And for you to come to them, especially if it's in another state, they'll remember you. And that's big. And I forgot about that. It was so long ago. But if you can afford it to take the time and make a road trip, it's worth it. And in every way possible, definitely. Yeah.
I think the smaller stations too, kind of what you were talking about, starting in the small, you learn so much because you are brand new out of school, there's a lot to be learned in those smaller stations, and it gives you the ability to have those mess ups, to have those flops, and build off of them and get stronger and better. So when you get to the next place, you're just improving from there instead of trying to go to a higher place where maybe then you have to take a step back because you're not pushing as far forward.
Right. For my last question, what can you tell students that have graduated and still have not found a job?
Be persistent. Know that you will. As long as you continuously improve your skill, whether it be your enunciation, your delivery, your tape, your resume, maybe you want to intern or get a job in the meantime locally if you can behind the camera. I mean, just stay in the industry. Make sure you're on all of the affiliated websites and you're in the know about everything possible, broadcast journalism, magazines. Just make sure you're in the loop with everything in your industry and something will come your way.
Yeah, and that is the key, persistence. If you want to work in the industry, you will eventually. I mean, if you really actually do want a job in radio news, in TV news, in any kind of news, not just broadcast, but journalism in general, as often as a lot of these companies are shedding jobs, they are still hiring because people either retire or they get burned out, whatever the case.
And you don't want to let it get you down. You definitely don't want to let it get you down. You want to just keep going and keep going, because you will go for weeks, months without hearing anything, but that's just where you want to just keep going and be persistent, like they've said, and eventually that will come up when the job does open.
And also, when you're in college or about to graduate, you have certain standards, you know your potential, and you know your skill level. So I think that we all set the bar really high, and it's not realistic. And that's what happened to me, is I was sending my tapes and putting all of my energy in markets that I should not have been submitting to. I wasn't qualified, I wasn't ready. And once I realized that and I became more practical and sent my tapes out to 187 Grand Junction, that's when I got calls and that's when I was hired. So you may just want to lower the bar a little bit and leave all of your options open, even if it means going to a place you've never heard of or you never imagined living, you know, because it's at the end of the day, you're doing what you love.
And even if you are one of the best reporters in the world, if a major market, if you're trying to get into a major market or a larger medium-sized market and you have no experience, a lot of those people still won't hire you because you don't have that experience, because you know, you don't have the reports under your belt, you don't have the anchoring under your belt, and they know what it takes to get a job. So they'd like to be able to get it to somebody who has put in the dues, who has paid the dues, because they've had to.
So now from going from the job market and landing that first job to actually working in your first market, Matt Johnson has questions on what the day-to-day life is for you guys.
All right. Is there one thing that you learned in school that has helped you as a professional? Let's start with Adam.
Yeah, I did. I learned the writing that I learned here has helped me, because there's a foundation that you learn in school on how to write. I remember taking Jim Hill's class and learning, I didn't know what natural sound was at the time, but so many packages that I do now are so based on that. It's the fundamentals that you learn in school that you take to that first job, and that's where you start to build. You start to use them, what you've learned, to kind of start building what you're doing, and then pick up along with the people in the newsroom and the people that you're working with. But the basis that you get from writing here, going through all those writing classes, I think has gone a long way in at least helping me from my first job and move forward.